Hi, Akshat.
Hey, Sargam.
Thank you for joining us. Been a long time. You were one of the first
Yeah,
supporters of
absolutely.
Thorsby on UPSC, and you mentored a lot of people. So many of them benefited from your advice and your journey. You had just gotten into your MPP when we had first connected. So I'd like everyone here to hear a little bit more about your journey from preparing for the UPSC to moving on to Save Life Foundation and then going on to doing your MPP.
Right. Um, Thank you, Sargam. Happy to be here. Happy to help. I think this is almost a necessary initiative, especially in the Indian context, where it's just shocking the number of graduates who are investing so much time and effort in civils and without, to be honest, very proportionate results. Um, so yeah, I mean, just to give a brief context and an introduction, I'm Akshat Garg. I currently work as Assistant Vice President WWF Singapore in Asia Sustainable Finance. I did my master's in public policy from Leek One U School, NUS, and I'm a fellow UPSC survivor, 5 attempts, 2015 to 2020. Till at some point I decided, okay, enough is enough, and it's time to move on in life. And I did my master's in public policy. So yeah, the start of my journey was that I joined civils prep right after my engineering, and after my first couple of attempts, I kind of realized that I wanted to keep working while also making sure that I gave as much time as possible to civils. So that's when I joined Save Life Foundation. Uh, I think the first thing that I learned while I was in Save Life Foundation and then I was in Government of India was the fact that the UPSC journey, I compare it to a frog in a well, right? You're the frog in a well, and so you're always very caught up in your well, and you kind of have to do that, right? You can't blame anybody who's doing that because you're putting disproportionate amount of effort and time into something that has very little chance of success, just probability wise. So you kind of have to convince yourself that this is the most important thing in my life. And I think what that happens, at least in my case, what happened is that you end up being both scared and stubborn. uh, when I mean scared, because you're scared to try for new things, because you obviously, if you've failed a couple of attempts, you feel like, oh, you're already behind in life and stuff like that. And then you also become stubborn because you feel like you have a depth of knowledge. It can become an insecurity that you're using as a shield or whatever. And that's what I realized, that I was very stubborn in terms of taking advice that was not aligned with my vision that UPSC is success, right? I remember that, which even then and even now has been one of the most life altering advice for me, was the fact that understand why you're doing civils, right? And for me, it was very clear that I want to be in a position to change the lives of millions of people, and positively influence them, right? And being a civil servant was one of the ways for me to do that. It is only when I talked to my then manager and mentor was the fact that you kind of need to flip this, right? When I'm working in road safety, if I am looking after a piece of road and making sure that it is safer, or I am involved in drafting of a legislation that gives rights to citizens of India, I am still doing exactly the same thing. I am impacting the lives of millions of people through my work. It's just you never realize it, right? You never realize it. You compartmentalize the two things. So it's important to think laterally, and to be able to think laterally, you kind of need people who are outside your ecosystem to give you good advice and for you to absorb that advice, right? It's time to stop spending so much time in civil services. I didn't even know that there existed a public policy program around the world, right? I was that naive because after engineering, I entered civils directly. So you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what the ecosystem can offer. And it was my then boss who then said that, listen, why don't you look at masters of public policy options around the world? And I looked up the various applications around the world. And then I saw that, okay, there is another way for me to continue to make the impact I want to make, right? or have the prestige or the power or any of those things that you do civil services for, uh, in 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 a way that may not in another way than civil services, right? So that was the first thing that was most important for me, is to let people invest in you. And that is what I feel like you kind of lose sight of when you're in the civil services journey.
Right. Could you talk a little bit more about how exactly can other people who are completely cutting themselves off let people invest in them? Baby steps towards that.
I mean, hindsight's 2020, right? I would have been much farther along in my career. Probably or probably not, had I listened to people, right?
Hmm.
I think one is you should really be open to having your ideology about civil services be questioned, right? Because it's that myth of sunken cost, right? Maybe I'll clear the next attempt. I cleared prelims last time. This time I've cleared mains. Next time, one step at a time, and so on and so forth. People within the UPS ecosystem, whether it's your profs, whether it is your parents, whether it's your colleagues who are studying with you, they would always encourage you. Your answers are so good, your prelims attempt was so good, you will definitely clear next time. There's that bias. So I feel like first thing is that you need to question yourself. And then also, it is very hard to do, at least for me it was. You have to break the mirage that UPSC is the best career, civil services is the best, and it's the only available career in this. I think you know that as a fact. You don't believe it in your heart, right? I had to work very hard to convince myself that yes, it is a very good career, but it is not the only good career. There are other good careers, there are other ways uh, of success. And once you break that, and then you find the right mentors, you seek advice. And I think that's one of the key things, right? You need, and maybe I got lucky in that my mentors were as stubborn as I was. Like,
Right.
they would tell me something, I would go do the exact opposite of it, and they would come again and give me the same advice next morning, right? Because they would say, don't give the next attempt, I will give the next attempt. They will say, apply for your masters, I will apply next year, right? So
This was,
it's also finding the right mentors.
this was your boss at Save Life, correct?
My boss, my manager, yes. So there were a few people, a few of my friends. So yeah, there was a pool of people.
Right, right. How has your life changed since the MPP?
See, one is the fact that any global masters, any global experience, you even take a 20-day trip to another country will change your horizon, right? You get out of the well, right? Yet you are able to I would say, for me, the biggest thing has been over the last 2 years is two things. One, it has changed my relationship with success and failure, right? Which was because I got up the UPSC space and I
Hmm.
started to do other things. I started to read a lot more. I started to see the stories of other people. There are people I met on during some of my solo travels who were doing a completely alternate life, right? So, a lawyer that I met, she was working remotely. She was a US lawyer. She would log in for 5 to 6 hours, just enough money to get her through the day, and then log out. Like, she did not let work become her life, right? The other was readings, which, for example, poems by Khalil Gibran, which talk about, for example, defeat, that talk about your relationship with defeat and success in that manner, right? And the fact that you meet more people in public policy schools, which are coming from very diverse background, with very different expertise, with different outlook of both life and career from you. And that allows you to really question this thing. The other thing is that, yes, the good thing about civils, or the fact that because at that point of time I did have a chip on my shoulder that I'm coming after this civils failure, so I need to make up for lost time. I really worked my really hard during my masters, right? I was tried to do very well in school. I was constantly doing internships, and I was trying to access institutions that I would not have accessed otherwise, right? So, for example, I interned with the UN, I interned with JPAL, organizations that I would not get even a call back when I applied for a job. I was now working with them as an
Right.
intern,
And
right? So
that's
that was skill leveraging.
your
Yeah.
master's. because of the brand.
During my masters,
associated with. Right, correct.
Yes.
So now going back to not wearing a chip on your shoulder, that is one piece of advice you wanted to give the other ex-aspirants or aspirants as well. Elaborate a little more on that, please.
Right. So this is that thing, right? Like there is no doubt that civil services change, the preparation changes you very fundamentally as a person, right? Because you go through this process and everybody go through that journey and whatever. You always feel either an inferiority complex or a superiority complex. Either I'm better than everybody because I am a martyr, or I'm worse than everybody because I did not do the 5 years or 6 years of corporate job that is helping others build their career. I think for me, I kind of realized that I need to get rid of it during my semester abroad. I had gone to Italy for my semester abroad, and it was the first time in like 5 or 6 years since my undergrad when I had, in a way, a life without responsibility, right? I did not feel the pressure to do another internship. I was able to be myself and, explore life in a different ecosystem completely. But it also made me realize that I will always be trapped in the same problem if I keep looking at life through my failure of civil services, right? It has happened. Everybody fails in different things in life, right? There are ways you can get out of it. You gave civil services, it didn't work out for you. You went and did your masters. You are in a corporate job. You are maybe an year or two behind people your own age, but you're doing well. It's the same for me, right? Maybe my own yardstick would have meant that I'm making double of what I was making today. But the point is that I've made up for some of the lost time, right? The thing that I want to really emphasize on is the fact that this chip on the shoulder mentality, what it does is it fills you with regret. You are unhappy during the process, right? You're constantly stressed. You're constantly feeling like you can't make even the smallest mistake, because the smallest mistake, you have that prelims mindset, even with everything, right? The smallest mistake and I'm out of the list, right? That's not how the world works. Yeah. Let's be honest, right? So you can make mistakes, you can take chances, you can do other things.
And you'll be better off for doing that.
It will be better off for it, right? And in fact, that is the thing that when I look back at my UPSC time, I feel like had I not been miserable during that time, at least I would have enjoyed the process. That was an important part of my life, right? What is life? Life is as you live it, right? So at that time, you had this pot of gold in the end that when I will become something, I will then enjoy everything and I will be miserable now. But that's not how it works, right? So I think once you get rid of the chip on your shoulder, you also become less stubborn. You start taking advice from people. You start exploring more and more opportunities. You ease off some of the pressure that you put on yourself, so you're not in that neurotic doomsday mindset all the time.
And can you hone down on that a little bit? Because I liked what you said about just living with this constant weight of pressure that now you have, whatever you do, it has to be 100% right. You cannot make one little mistake. It's just a sense of pressure. Can you talk a little bit more about how you think it manifested in your life or in the life of other aspirants you've seen?
Dude, it was the same, right? When I joined my first semester of masters, I was like, every single day I need to do well in class. I need to make sure I get a very good grade, because if my CGPA is before 4.5, my life is ruined. I will never get a job, right? I need to do internships all the time. If somebody else was doing something, I was like, why am I not doing it? Even though I had no time for it, right? If somebody is working there, I should apply there. If somebody is doing this, I should do this as well. If somebody is doing this random course, then I should sign up for this, because you're always living a comparative life, because you feel like whatever you do is going to be less, right? It is that same attitude that you have during your prelims, which your profs really tell you against, right? Don't pick up every book. Pick 5 books and finish them and keep reading them over and over again. And it's that same thing, right? So you're scattered around it, right? And this is something that my father told me, and I feel like that was good advice in that you also have to accept that you are starting a new life.
Yeah.
Right? See, the problem is that if I did 5 years in UPSC and and I was working through 3 or 4 years of it. And then I want basically after my master's to get the same opportunity as somebody who had worked 7 years full-time corporate job gets, right? That is your expectation, that is should be my station in life. I make up for lost time, but that doesn't happen. You're starting something fresh.
Yeah.
The people, your expertise, your network is only going to reflect the time you've spent in the industry, right? So there is no harm in trying to work harder than everybody else and do that. At least not for me. But there is harm in feeling like if you don't do it, it is all or nothing, which is the UPSC mindset that if I don't answer one question, I'm lost. Yeah. That is not. And I think what that does is how it manifests it is that it manifests in your interpersonal relationships, right? Because you're always in that mindset. Nobody understands what I am going through. Now, my challenges are unique from everybody else. You're not, right? There are people if you go at a master's school, look at your master's, my master's, you look at your colleagues, everybody has had different struggles in their life, right? Anybody who's gone through UPSC is no more unique than anybody else. And the fact that anybody who has cleared or not cleared UPSC is no more unique or not unique than anybody else. You start a job. UPSC is not the end of your life. It is the start of your life, right? Correct. So every person who comes back home after a job comes and cribs about the job. Everybody is unhappy with their salary, and everybody is unhappy with their work profile, right? Everybody wants to do better, right? Okay. Which is fine.
That is a tad pessimistic. So let us.
The point is that we oversell UPSC and we oversell the failure in UPSC, and it's the fact that the optimism, the way I look at it is that this is optimistic because it tells you that there are different ways to do things. It is okay to fail, and it's okay to have days when you don't give 100%, and it's okay to say no to some opportunities that don't align with what you want to do in life.
Right. Thank you.
You can't jump at each and everything.
More optimistic turn on that. Okay, now let us talk about filling your time beautifully. This is something you said in the context of your hobbies. Yeah. And I remember how through coffee, you did a lot of stuff. You raised funds for COVID. So talk a little bit about that and how just following hobbies in general is something that can lead to new opportunities for people.
Right. So when I say fill your time beautifully, it's actually picked up of a matchstick by that comes with a Davidoff. So the Davidoff matchstick has that written behind it. It's their way of talking about cigars, right? But the way I look at it, it's not essentially just about hobbies. It's about everything, right? I said that my biggest regret is that I was miserable through those 5 years, right? There are things that everybody does, and they are good at or they are interested in. Somebody may be interested in running, somebody may be interested in social welfare, maybe helping others. For me, it was coffee, right? Because I continued to invest in that hobby, even during my civil services days. When the pandemic happened, I was with Government of India at that point of time, and people needed help. I was able to use that skill set of what I had developed to come and do these fundraisers through coffee and raise some money and then give these donations and help others, right? And that the very funny thing is that a lot of people who come and ask for mentorship with respect to UPSC journeys, what do they say? I have nothing to write about these 3 or 5 years, right? Because I was doing nothing else. But how is that possible? You were existing and you were doing something, even if it was meeting friends, it was reading something, it was understanding something about life. You were reading anything and everything about the Indian history. You must have had some thoughts. Even if you were writing mains answer, you were writing, right? My master's application was so focused on my journey through coffee, what I learned through coffee, what I learned about life on balance, right? That coffee is a balance of 5 flavors, and so is life, and so is policy making. The point is that end of the day, it's the story you tell, right? So if you are doing things that you are passionate about and you're committed to and that you want to delve deeper into, I think it helps in 2 ways. One, it makes you less miserable because you're doing something that you enjoy. And more so, it helps you become and present yourself as a more holistic person, no matter what you are trying to do, right? In fact, I joked about this a number of times. I joked about this with you as well, that coffee has done more for my public policy career than public policy has, because I was always passionate about it. I love to talk about it. So it was a good way to network as well, right? I met so many interesting people through coffee. I did this entire Coffee for Good initiative during pandemic through that interest, right? It has also, when you are doing your master's, it is such a hard time. You're in a different country and everything. Coffee is the one thing that has been constant for me, right? So I think it is important that anybody who is either getting out of UPSC or is in UPSC or is doing something now in terms of the job or transition out of it, stick to your hobbies, things you're passionate about, things you care about, because they act as an anchor in your life, and they also add a lot of value to whatever you're going to do next. You don't know how it's going to help you.
Yeah, I agree. Right. Because the audience doesn't know, I want you to elaborate a little bit more on coffee doing more for your policy career, briefly, before we move on to our last point. I know you know, but people watching don't know. And it's
Is that
a fascinating journey to watch as well.
I think I think what I say, that coffee has done more for my policy career than policy has, because I think your mindset changes when you talk about things that you're passionate about, right? How you share that experience changes, right? There are people who I would have met on LinkedIn, on Instagram. Um, I would go to a networking event and I would say that, oh, I'm really interested in coffee. And then they would talk about, because that's something a lot of people would relate to, right? Um, in fact, even in my master's application, the first paragraph was about coffee. Um, the the essence of it is that there is more to your hobbies, there's more to you, there's more to your activities in day to day that you than you realize. It is the very same thing that I said in the very first point, that it is about shifting the lens. It is about that, bringing that lateral thinking into this, that how do I retell my story, right? There are people, even, okay, let's say with coffee also, there are coffee plantations have a very same parallel this thing with palm oil plantations and other crop plantations. And now today, when I'm in sustainable finance, I have a better understanding of a lot of these elements in my work, because I have just spent time with coffee and I've spent time in an estate, so I can visualize a lot of those things, right? So that is just one of those elements. It's also helpful to then break out of this one dimension of your personality that may be UPSC or your career, and add multiple dimensions, and you can present yourself as a more holistic person. You can talk about multiple things, and that is the one skill set I feel that UPSC provides with to everybody who's studied well. You literally have an opinion on every topic in the world, right? Because that's how you're trained. Now, opinion about everything along with multiple hobbies and passions, then you can come across as a very well read and a very rounded person, even if that makes you feel like an imposter for a while. But at least it gives opens new avenues for you.
Correct. Okay, moving on to our last point that you wanted to share with everybody. You want people to invest in people. You want aspirants to invest in people. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It again, it ties to all of those things: being stubborn, having a chip on your shoulder, not filling your time beautifully, and stuff like that. I feel like we become so caught up in our own mess that we forget that we live in a society, and that there are people going through the same thing. I think, I don't know what it is called. It's called therapy by sympathy or whatever, right? Like, you learn more when you teach others. When I talk to somebody who's going through the civil services journey and is trying to transition now, and I share my story with them, or I listen to their problems and I try to see how I can help or help them with their network or anything like that, it also helps me understand my journey better. There are so many revelations about my life that I understand. There is this entire thing, right? Like if I am on a podcast with you, it doesn't mean my life is perfect. It is a work in progress, right? So the more people I help, the more people I reach out to. It is the very element of paying it forward. Just because you've made it, you stand on shoulders of others, right? It took a village of people to get me to where I am. There are people who read my applications, edited my applications. I literally, when I wrote my first draft of essay, it was so bad. It was so bad. I can't tell you. I sent it to like 15 people. All of them I knew, marked them all in an email, said that, guys, I've written this. I don't know how to improve it. I don't have the money to hire a consultant right now. I need your help. And those people helped me, right? So now when I can help somebody else, I feel morally obligated to. Secondly, it is good for you because it helps you understand a little bit more about your own journey as well. And the third thing is, like I said before, it helps you to step out of your own prejudices, your own well, and out of yourself to then look at the larger ecosystem. I'll give you a more shrewd understanding of this. A lot of people think that politicians are dumb and politicians are illiterate and anything like that, right? I would argue that they're the smartest people that we know. Why? Because that is how information works. If I talk to 5 sargams, for instance, right? So 5 I would condense, and Akshat would have the best information that he has condensed out of 5 sargams. Now take somebody who talks to 5 Akshats. He has condensed the information of 5 Akshats. So then that person has information of 25 sargams, right? It's the same reason why you would see an MLA or an MP or somebody in a position of power, so to speak, have a lot more clarity of thought, a lot more strategic thinking, because they're collating a lot more information. Imagine an MLA is collating information of an entire constituency, right? An MP is doing a lot more people. So if you're helping from a shrewd point of view, if you were helping others, the more people you're engaging with, you're developing more and more information points, even for yourself. If you were a completely selfish person, your best bet is to help others, because you will collate a lot more information about yourself and about opportunities in life that are going to make your analysis in life much sharper.
Yeah.
Right? So whether you want to do it for others or you want to do it for yourself, I feel like it's essential to invest in others, because it also makes you feel useful. And UPSC has a lot of those days when you feel useless.
That is true. I like how you don't mince your words, Akshat. And on that note, if you have any last 1 or 2 sentences or a favorite quote or a reading recommendation that you want to leave the audience with.
So two things. One is, if you're getting out of UPSC, get out of the ecosystem. Don't get caught up in the fact that I'll become a mains teacher, I'll become this thing, I will be a paper evaluator. Just get out. There is more to life. Explore, learn, get out. If you want to have a good career and a good life in general, always run a race that you have an odds of winning. Right? So pick a career in which you have an opportunity to reach the top, because then at least you have room to grow and you have room to learn. The other thing, I feel like everybody that at least that really helped me were 2 readings. One was Defeat by Kelly Gibran. I think it is a brilliant poem that changed my relationship with defeat. And then it's the poem Desiderata by Max Ernham, which I feel like is your guiding star, my guiding star on how to live life. You can listen to it once a week. I still listen it to once a week because it reminds me of how I want to live my life and what are the important elements for it. Yeah, I mean, more so just don't take things too seriously. Yeah, it's not that big a deal. It's fine. Life works out.
Okay.
I'm not exceptionally brilliant person, so I know that if it worked out for me, it can work out for everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Akshat, for your time on a Sunday.